Hello class, good day. This is a pre-recorded lesson discussion in Introduction to World Religions and Belief System. So the topic that I'm going to discuss for this discussion is Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, lesson objectives. At the end of the lesson, the students will be able to explain the core teachings of Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism and examine the 3 levels of perfection of Mahayana Buddhism. The basic teachings of Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism is known as the first tradition of Buddhism that emerged after Buddha's death. Its scriptures are written in the ancient Pali language, a dialect that is derived from the Sanskrit language. Theravada Buddhism is a predominant religion in a number of Southeast Asian countries such as Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. Okay, Theravada Buddhism basically is a branch of Buddhism that existed after the establishment of the original Buddhism, which is established by Buddha. Okay, compared to Mahayana teachings, Theravada teachings are more direct, practical, simple, and down to earth. Okay, Theravada Buddhism is the close one related to the original Buddhism compared with Mahayana, since Mahayana is more liberal compared with Theravada. That's why Theravada is easier to understand compared with Mahayana. Furthermore, Theravada teaching believes that sainthood can be obtained here on earth. This can be achieved if one strives to become a monk, seeking and attaining enlightenment, which then leads one to become a saint. Okay. It is believed that when a saint dies, he or she attains nirvana and is liberated from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. So in Theravada teaching, it emphasizes about the attaining of the ultimate peace that a person can obtain in his or her life. So Theravada emphasizes obtaining and liberation of the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. One of the important characteristics of Theravada Buddhism is its emphasis on monastic living. Monastic Buddhists, unlike lay Buddhists, focus their efforts on cultivating higher spiritual development in order to attain their single goal. Okay, monks and nuns alike, guided by the teaching of Buddha and the rules of monastic discipline, strive to develop Pana, which means wisdom, Sila, which means ethical virtue, and Samadhi, which means mental concentration. So in Theravada Buddhism, you may encounter monks and nuns that are practicing this specific branch of Buddhism. In short, Theravada Buddhism tries to remain faithful to the teachings of Buddha by emphasizing the role of the individual without depending on others or the gods in attaining enlightenment. They believe that enlightenment can be attained by meditating and cultivating ethical virtues and wisdom. So unlike other religions, tong Theravada Buddhism emphasizes your own spiritual journey. It's about improving yourself, obtaining peace, obtaining wisdom, obtaining ethical virtues. Compared with other religions, they emphasize your interaction or communication with gods or deities or gods and goddesses. But in Theravada Buddhism, it emphasizes your own growth. The law of dependent origination or Pratitya Samutpada. The enlightenment of the Buddha with the connection among the existence of life, death, and rebirth is called the law of dependent origination. Okay, basically, when you say law of dependent origination, uh, it contains the uh, fundamental concept of Buddhism, which emphasizes cause and effect, or it indicates the suffering, the reasons why people suffer. Okay, there are 12 components or links in the law of dependent origination. The first two links, ignorance and karma formations, have to do with the causes in the past life which bring rebirth to the present life. So the first two links means that it has to do with um, karma and reincarnation. It has something to do with your previous life that can affect your rebirth in your next life. Okay, the first link, ignorance, is not knowing and not understanding the Dharma and the Four Noble Truths. So one of the reasons why people suffer, according to the teaching of Theravada Buddhism, is that they are ignorant of the Dharma and the Four Noble Truths, which are the central teachings in Theravada Buddhism. The second link, karma formations, together with ignorance, result to the third link, which is consciousness. The rebirth of a person's consciousness happens at the moment he or she was born, which results to the fourth link, name and form. So your ignorance can affect your reincarnation or your rebirth. So whatever you did in your previous life can affect your future life or the life that you have when you experience reincarnation. In effect, the fifth link or the sixth senses arises, which are the five physical senses and the mind. This in turn arises the sixth link, which is the contact between the senses and its objects. Because of the contact between the senses and their appropriate objects, there arising feeling, which is the seventh link. Because of feeling arises craving, which is the eighth link. Craving is a desire for these objects. So which means that your earthly desires, your cravings for material things are penetrating you on your growth. The ninth link, grasping or desire itself, is conditioned by craving. So because of grasping, people tend to go back to the second link, karma formations, which is repeating the actions in the past life, which arises the third link, rebirth of consciousness, hence the 10th link, becoming. In effect, the 11th link, rebirth of consciousness, brings sorrow. The cycle of rebirths of consciousness, or the last link, leads to decay, pain, suffering, and death. So generally, when we talk about the law of dependent origination, it talks about the cycle of suffering, about the progress or the reasons or the causes why one can suffer. And it originated about our ignorance of the teachings in Buddhism. It's about the Dharma and the Four Noble Truths. And it also affects our cravings, our appetite for earthly desires, for material things that brings us suffering. The Buddha realized in his enlightenment that once people understand the law of dependent origination, the cause and effect relationship of things, they can start to break the links of conditioned arising. Okay, the Buddha realized that when pleasant things arise, people should not cling to those things. So when unpleasant things arise, people should not blame. When neutral things arise, they should not forget. The way to wisdom and awareness is the path to freeing oneself from condition arising. So it's very important that you are very aware of the teachings in Theravada Buddhism, which emphasizes the Dharma and the Four Noble Truths. And it's very important in Theravada Buddhism that you need to break the cycle of rebirth, since you cannot escape the worldly sufferings if you are still in the cycle. So in order to break that, you need to follow the teachings. You need to break free. You need to have a journey in your own in terms of improving your spiritual life. A person must therefore exert powerful mindfulness in every moment, not to allow feelings to produce desire. When there is mindfulness, detachment, and letting go, there is no desire. So in order for you to abstain yourself from earthly desires, you need to be mindful of yourself and your environment. You need to detach from things that cannot help you to improve your spiritual life. You need to meditate. You need to abstain yourself from your fleshly desires. So in order to do that, you need to be mindful of the teachings of Theravada Buddhism. Basic teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. So background of Mahayana Buddhism. At the end of the Maurya period, about the 2nd century BCE, Buddhism quietly developed and spread unaffected by political changes in India. During that period, Buddhism was divided into at most 18 sects because of differing views on the teachings of Buddha. One of these sects was Mahayana. Its teachings can be traced to the Pali Sutta Pitaka, an ancient literature on Buddha's teaching. Okay, because Buddhism spread out in Asian region, many of the countries in Asia, many of the teachings have uh, revolutionized, meaning there are changes in the beliefs in Buddhism. So uh, the one of the beliefs that rooted from the original Buddhism is the Mahayana. The actual date and place of the founding of Mahayana Buddhism are unknown. It is believed that its history can be traced to the 1st century BCE. So we can assume that Mahayana Buddhism developed naturally, since many of its adherents came from different backgrounds, different cultures. So when they absorb Buddhism, the original Buddhism, they included it with their own system, with their own culture. So there's a mixture of their old culture and their adapted culture came from the original Buddhism. The Mahayana offers various ways to attain liberation by overcoming suffering. It appeals to ordinary lay people and monks, as well as across cultures and personalities. Mahayana possesses revolutionary ideas regarding Buddhist teachings. Unlike the teachings of Theravada that point to the conservative and traditional observance of the teachings of Buddha, the Mahayana teaches beyond what Buddha had preached. So this means that Mahayana Buddhism created their own system, although they adapted uh, the teachings of Buddha, but added some of they added many teachings that cannot be found in the original Buddhism. So unlike Theravada Buddhism, there are most of the practices, the beliefs in Theravada Buddhism um, are closely related to the original Buddhism. But in Mahayana, they have a lot of changes because they added so many things. Mahayana Buddhists also claim that they have the proper and correct thinking when it comes to interpreting the teachings of Buddha. So which means that aside from the teachings of Buddha, they also included their own interpretation, which can affect the present practices that they have right now. Okay, partly because of its revolutionary teachings, Mahayana Buddhism fragmented into various schools. So since there are a lot of interpretations of the teachings of Buddha in Mahayana Buddhism, so there are a lot of school of thoughts in Mahayana Buddhism. First, the Madhyamika. Madhyamika school or middle way was founded by an Indian philosopher named Nagarjuna, who wrote the text called Perfection of Wisdom. We also have Yogacara. The Yogacara, also known as consciousness-only school, flourished in China from the 6th to 9th century and emphasized the importance of meditation. The Pure Land School, which is the most widely known Mahayana school today, was established by an Indian prince named Dharmakara. And another one is the Chan School, which claims to hail from a Dharma talk by Buddha on Vulture Peak in India. So as you can see, these schools, the Madhyamika School, Yogacara, Pure Land School, and Chan School, they have specializations of the teachings in Mahayana Buddhism. They have focus in respective focuses in the teachings in Theravada Buddhism. Okay, sutras as sources of Mahayana teachings. Okay, there are major characteristics of Mahayana Buddhism. The different schools of Mahayana Buddhism share the following major characteristics, which are the sutras, the 6 virtues of perfections, so the generosity, morality, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom, the one that we discussed on our last lesson. And we have Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and the teaching of an emptiness or Dharmakaya. So let's discuss first the sutras as sources of Mahayana teachings. Okay, Buddhahood is the main purpose of the Mahayana practice. To attain this is to strive for bodhicitta and then adopt the bodhisattva vows. Vows formally taken by a Buddhist to liberate all beings from the cycle of births and deaths. Okay, those who are aspiring to take bodhisattva vows are called aspiring bodhicitta. So this activity involves aspiring bodhicitta to attain enlightenment not for one's own benefit but for others, which means that they are aiming to have good relationship, harmonious and peaceful relationship with other people because they are trying to avoid harm to other people. It is important to refer to the sutras when explaining and describing Mahayana Buddhism. The literary creativity of the Mahayana tradition gave rise to the production of various sutras over the centuries. Though there's no particular names given to honor the literary creation of sutras, the Mahayana sutras are distinctively different from sutras of other kinds of Buddhism. Since that's what I have mentioned earlier, they have their own interpretation. That's why Mahayana Buddhism, they have their own kind of sutras of Buddhism. The Perfection of Wisdom Sutras is among the earliest writings on Mahayana ideas. These writings disprove the teachings of Theravada Buddhism, which in a way humiliated the followers of Theravada Buddhism, the rival group of Mahayana Buddhism. So which means that even though Theravada and Mahayana rooted or originated from Buddhism, though they have the same teachings, but they also have differences. They have different characteristics, they have different practices. That's why there are conflicts between these two branches of Buddhism because they have their own interpretation. The writing focuses on one's quest for bliss or nirvana. Pursuit of nirvana is no longer exclusive to monks. It applies to all. It is in this aspect that Mahayana Buddhism characteristically differs from other branches of Buddhism. Okay. As what I have mentioned earlier, say Theravada Buddhism focuses on the monks. Monks can only obtain nirvana. can only have the pursuit of nirvana. But in Mahayana Buddhism, it's different. Kasi it's applicable to all people, not just for monks. We also have Lotus Sutra. The most influential among the numerous sutras that describe and propagate Bodhisattva's way are Lotus Sutra and a group of sutras called Perfection of Wisdom. Both are thought to be from the early Mahayana period, written from the 1st century BC in over several centuries. Okay, the teachings of Lotus Sutra is likened to the lotus flowers, which remain unstained despite being rooted in muddy waters. Buddha and his teachings appear in this world, bringing forth an unworldly joy. So there's the metaphor to this teaching. Kasi itong lotus blooms in a muddy place. For example, in swamps. So it's the same thing in Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism can be used how to live our lives in a chaotic world. Okay, the 6 virtues of perfection. In Mahayana, the practice of paramitas, or the 6 virtues of perfection, involves training the self to learn self-detachment. This training does not pertain to self-indulgence, but rather to benefit others. So in Mahayana, it emphasizes the virtues of 6 perfection. And these 6 virtues of perfection is necessary in order for the people to know how to detach themselves from worldly desires. So if we're going to obtain these 6 virtues of perfection, you'll be able to abstain yourself from worldly desires. So the purpose of 6 virtues perfection is not for the self, for ourselves, or for personal gain of the adherents of Theravada Buddhism, but rather in order for others to benefit. The word paramita in Sanskrit means having reached the other shore. This means perfection or transcendence. So reaching on the other side of the shore means having the capacity to transcend oneself and thereby attain nirvana, meaning you're going to transcend from earthly activities or the usual people do in their daily lives, the usual worldly activities. So if we're going to perform paramita, you're going to transcend from worldly activities. Okay, the 6 paramitas are generosity, morality, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom. Generosity can be practiced in 2 modes, with intention or motive and without intention or motive. Okay. Generosity with motive involves performing a generous deed while expecting something in return. Okay. Others tend to be generous in order to be recognized by others. On the other hand, generosity without selfish motives is giving freely without asking anything in return. This results in fearlessness, dharma, and wealth. So meaning on generosity, you can be practiced in 2 ways. Meaning, you can be generous, be giving to other people without expecting in return from them. And another one is giving to other people with expecting in return, be it from other people or to the people that you favored with. Then morality. It means conducting oneself according to Buddha's precepts. Basic among these precepts are refraining from doing harmful deeds, cultivating virtue, and doing good to all. So there are 5 basic Buddhist precepts that are opposite these 3 cumulative pure moral principles, like killing, stealing, lying, committing sexual transgression, and intoxication. So in morality, you're going to abstain yourself from harming other people, doing bad things, from doing things that are not beneficial, that are disadvantageous to other people, especially it will harm them. It will not do good to them. Then we have patience, also known as pacified patience. This not only teach a person how to wait for the proper time, but also to be both mentally and physically stable. So when one is patient, he or she has in a way gained a trained and pacified mind. There are three things in which patience should be cultivated: patience towards others, patience toward the environment, and patience to endure dharma. So patience, you know how to wait, you know how to compose yourself, you know how to maintain good character while waiting. It's not just about being able to wait for the right time, but you also have to mind your character during the time you wait. And you should also be mindful of your mental and physical health, because in patience you need to be stable in all aspects. Then we have energy. It develops zeal in one's practice. Okay, the Buddhist scriptures say that Buddhas Shakyamuni and Maitreya both gave rise to Buddhi mind or enlightenment at the same time. But Shakyamuni, the Buddha of his era, attained Buddhahood first because he was gifted with such intense energy. So we say energy, you're being zealous. You are on fire when it comes to um, your pursuit in your spiritual life, in your nirvana. Okay, the practice of meditation has 6 aspects: the seeking, waiting, enjoyment, bliss, oneness, and putting down. So seeking begins when one engages in contemplation. Okay, for example, if you are practicing counting with your fingers, the mind is aware of and focus and counting the fingers. So in meditation, you're going to seek your for your um to seek your pursuit in your spiritual life. So you have to enjoy during the process. You also need to be one with yourself when it comes to your meditation. Okay, wisdom is acquired when one leans toward enlightenment and eliminates ignorance. So Buddha said that when ignorance and vexation arise, individuals do certain actions and then receive karma as a result of those deeds. So if you going to commit negative actions or bad actions, it will come back to you, meaning there's karma to it. What goes around comes around. So, in order for you to avoid the consequences or ramifications of your own actions, you need to be wise. You need to be prudent with your decisions in life, with your actions, the way you treat yourself, the way you treat other people, the way you treat the environment. The next one, the Bodhisattva and Buddhas. How Mahayana defines itself is based on a concept of Bodhisattva. This refers to the enlightenment stage before Buddhahood. According to early Pali literature, among the Bodhisattvas, Siddhartha Gautama became Buddha. However, Mahayana Buddhism took a different definition of Bodhisattva. Those who are committed to attaining enlightenment are called Bodhisattvas. So in Mahayana texts, liberation or nirvana is gained collectively or collegially rather than individually. This is the reason why there is no other Buddha, but there are many Bodhisattvas. So meaning, in Mahayana Buddhism, although you can have your own journey towards your spiritual life, but you can also um, pursue your spiritual life with other adherents of Theravada, Mahayana Buddhism. And we have the Dharmakaya. It is important to remember that Buddhism is not centered upon the person of Buddha. Buddha himself ignored the importance of his person and counseled against making it the foundation of Buddhist practice. You remember, Buddhism originated from Hinduism, but Buddhism eliminated the worship of many gods, goddesses, or deities. Unlike in Hinduism, they have so many gods that they worship. So, but in Buddhism, it emphasizes the exclusion of the founder himself, which is Siddhartha Gautama, but it focuses on individuals' journey. For those who had immediate contact with Buddha, his death was a devastating event as he was the only Buddha that lived and died among them, and because he made himself accessible to them. Okay. But from the beginning, his followers were free to expand what they believed Buddha was and to present what they thought were his remarkable qualities. So that's why we have what we call Buddhas, plural, meaning there are a lot of Buddhas in Mahayana Buddhism. Comparison between the Theravada and the Mahayana. Theravada and Mahayana are both sects of Buddhism, which sought to board vessels of the Dharma that would take adherents to the other shore. So, both Theravada and Mahayana, um, their objectives or their aim is to help other people to reach the other shore, meaning to transcend from worldly activities. They differed on the size and accommodations of the preferred vessel. To share the good news with the people of India and other countries, passengers chose one of the two vessels. So people can choose between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. For clarity and simplicity, you can say that the Theravada vessel sailed south and east to India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, and Indonesia. The Mahayana vessel first sailed north, then east and west. So they have different influences in terms of the regions or the geographical locations in Asia. So these are differences between Mahayana and Theravada. Okay, for Buddha, in Theravada, Buddha is just like us. It's just a man, just human being like us. For Mahayana, it's about transcendental, it's about eternal, absolute, saves all of us. For Bodhisattva, very few, tsaka individualistic. Sa Mahayana naman, it's infinite or altruistic. In terms of worldview, Theravada is more realistic, while Mahayana idealistic. In terms of suffering, suffering is to be escaped from by an analysis and scholarly efforts, according to Theravada. For Mahayana, find meaning in transcending suffering by experimentation and intuition. Excuse me. And for Nirvana, doing no evil, eightfold path, so on and so forth, according to Theravada. For Mahayana, you need to do good, you need to understand and perform paramitas, understand the meaning of true emptiness. You need to obtain yourself. You need to abstain yourself from earthly desires. Okay, comparative analysis of Hinduism, Theravada Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, at the end of this lesson, the students will be able to distinguish the similar features of Hinduism and Buddhism, and examine the basic doctrines of Hinduism and Buddhism that make them attract millions of followers. Okay, comparative analysis of Dharmic religion. Dharmic religion is the term being referred to Hinduism, Theravada Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism. Kasi they all believe in Dharma. Okay, origin. Both Hinduism and Buddhism, two of the world's great religions, trace their origin in India. So both of these religions originated in India. Believed to be the oldest living religion in the world, the early beginnings of Hinduism with its forms and themes may have begun around the third millennium BCE. So both of these religions are established in India. Remember, Buddhism originated from Hinduism. And Buddhism, uh, it created various sects or branches like Theravada and Mahayana. Hinduism has no precise moment of origin and no specific founder or prophet, unlike other world religions. So Hinduism, we cannot point out who's the founder, who's the one established this religion. Buddhism also traces its source in northern India around the 6th century BCE as another interpretation of the Hindu belief. This religion is closely linked to its founder, Siddhartha Gautama, who is also referred to as the Buddha or the Enlightened One. So unlike Hinduism, Buddhism has a specific founder, which is Siddhartha Gautama, a former prince um, who pursued his spiritual life and obtained enlightenment along his journey. Okay, around the 3rd century BCE, Buddhism reached neighboring Asian countries as a result of the missionary zeal of Indian rulers. A different outlook to salvation attracted many Asians to embrace the tenets of Buddhism as it reached China, India, Korea, and Indochina Peninsula. So Buddhism, it flourished in neighboring countries, especially in Asia, in China, um, mm, in Thailand and other parts of this region. Okay, in terms of morality, Hinduism is said to be the most tolerant of all religions as there are numerous ways to manifest one set of Hindu belief. So, Hinduism, they're tolerant of other people's beliefs and practices and other people's lifestyle. So remember, in Hinduism, they accept whatever belief you have. They also believe in the gods, goddesses, or deities, other religions. So they're very open. However, while in Hinduism may seemingly lack a cohesive system of beliefs and practices, most of its adherents hold several key moral values such as karma and dharma. So even though they're very open with other people's beliefs, but still they adhere to their original teachings, the original beliefs, the concepts of karma and dharma, and their own set of moral values. The notion of balance and order in this universe is integral to the Hindu belief. People are born in this world with specific duties to perform in accordance to their status in society, such as those elements related to gender and caste. Remember, in India, they're very particular with their caste system, meaning what's your social status in the society, then you need to uphold your obligations and responsibilities based on your social status. This is the concept of dharma wherein people must accomplish their tasks so that society can prosper as a whole, meaning there's all people belong in one group, one social group. They have their responsibilities in order to function the society as a whole. While the Buddha embraced the general framework of Indian ideas, he radically altered many of them. Similarly, the cycle of rebirth persists in Buddhism, and succeeding lives may be affected by the moral laws of cause and effect of karma. Until one has achieved enlightenment, one's deed in the present lifetime will affect the course of future rebirth. So, um, the cause and effect relationship in the teachings in Buddhism as a central or influence in the practices in Buddhism. So your previous lives can affect your rebirth or your future self. So you need to be mindful with the life that you live, and um, people should um, be mindful in order to break the cycle of rebirth, uh, in order to obtain nirvana. Next one is the purpose. In Hinduism, there are four desirable goals of life, or purushartha. All Hindus aim to achieve the fourfold purpose of life that includes dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Okay, in addition to the four goals of life, traditional Hindus often the four stages of life, or the ashramas. Okay, in Buddhism, the principal purpose of one's life is to terminate all forms of suffering caused by attachment to impermanent entities such as material things, friends, and health. So it's very important for Buddhism that they're going to abstain themselves from earthly desires. So as what I've mentioned earlier, it's very important to understand the art of detachment, meaning uh, you need to detach yourself from the things that cannot help you progress or flourish your spiritual pursuit or your spiritual growth, because they might hinder your personal growth. In Theravada Buddhism, the monastic way of life ensures the path toward enlightenment. For the Buddhist laity, they must first be reborn as monks for them to be eligible for enlightenment. So in Theravada Buddhism, it's very important that you need to be monk in order to uh, pursue your spiritual journey. Unlike in Mahayana Buddhism, it's applicable to all, even though they're not monks, even though they're just ordinary citizens or ordinary people. But in Theravada Buddhism, it's a prerequisite to be monk. In contrast, Mahayana Buddhism offers enlightenment to anyone, not only for the members of the monastic order, but also for those with families and secular careers. As what I have mentioned earlier, it is applicable to all people, not just for monks. Okay, for destiny, simply put, the destiny of all Hindus involves reincarnation until such time they gain ultimate enlightenment. Hinduism believes that within human is an eternal soul, or the Atman, that is being reborn millions of times and in many forms subject to moral law of karma. So in Hinduism, um, reincarnation has a great influence to their system. So in order for you to break reincarnation, it's because it's a cycle of suffering. You need to obtain the ultimate enlightenment. You need to obtain nirvana in order to break the cycle. So for Hinduism, you need to be one with the eternal soul, or the Atman. Meanwhile, Buddhism holds that no soul is being reborn because there is no permanence in anything. The Buddha preached his followers to achieve their own salvation conscientiously because external forces have no control over their life and circumstances. Okay, for views on women. The status of women in ancient India is nothing to be desired as they are always seen as inferior to men in all aspects of life. So in India, uh, they're very particular with patriarchal culture, meaning the dominance of men or male figure in the society, whereas women are bound to um, subservient, bound um, to serve the men, the male figures in a society. Restrictions abound with their daily activities. Tending household chores would be their primary role, so they are bound to do household chores, meaning they just stay in their house. Women are to be taken care of by their parents in their childhood days, by their husbands when they marry, and by their sons when they reach old age. Meaning, um, women are regarded to be dependent to men. Like when they're still child, meaning they need to be dependent to their parents. And when they're old, when they marry, they need to be dependent to their husbands. And when they reach their old age, they need to be dependent to their sons. Religious and educational liberties for women are severely lacking, meaning they're restricted to participate in educational and religious activities. So they have very limited access to education and their religion. And that's the end of my discussion.